Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so happy you're with us today. We do seem to keep on doing this every week, don't we, my wonderful friends? Sometimes it amazes me to stop and think and realize that it's coming up on 10 years now, this coming June, since we started this experiment in learning and growing together. Or maybe it's only 9 years. I don't know. I lose track after a while. I'm sure I've told you before where the title to this podcast came from, but for those who never have heard this story, back at the end of May of 2013, I guess it is only 9 years, I got a call out of the blue from a podcast company offering me a position as a podcast host because of my book, The Fun of Dying. I had almost never even heard of podcasting. Who hears of podcasting? But I thought, what the heck? As we were getting ready to do our first podcast, and in those very early days, they were primarily recorded as a live radio show, I was asked what I wanted to call it. Of course, everyone, and that included me, thought we ought to call it something related to the afterlife. But my primary spirit guide, and then I had no idea, anything about my guide. I knew we had them, but I'd never really met him. He piped up, and I heard myself say, Seek Reality. And I thought, where did that come from? Everyone was flustered to hear it. I was most flustered of all, I guess. But that's what we called it. And now today, of course, we're recording our 452nd episode of the Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes podcast. And as we speak, work is rapidly progressing now on Seek Reality Online, which will be led by our wonderful friend, Dr. R. Craig Hogan, and it will be the definitive source of death and the afterlife education worldwide. Last week, we spoke with Sandra Champlain about her work with Sonia Rinaldi. And this week, here with us for the third time is the other truly great researcher in the field of electronic voice phenomena, or EVP, and Instrumental Transcommunication, or ITC, in the entire world. Anabela Cardoso was one of the first female Portuguese international diplomats. I mean, we're talking a serious person here. She had an illustrious career going, and then her pioneering work with ITC first came to light, and she more or less had to choose. I admire Anabela so much for following her heart. She has had an amazing and much admired career in ITC research, and she's written several excellent books, both individually and with other pioneers in this field. She also runs at the ITC Journal, and she's a truly beautiful, beautiful human being. My dear Anabela, welcome. I'm so happy to have you back again with us for the third time.
Yes, thank you, Roberta. And let me say that the title of your program is I like it. It's very nice. Seek Reality is beautiful. It's short, conveys the message. Yeah, it's a very good choice. If it was your guide or not, that we don't know. Perhaps it was, as you say.
It wasn't my idea, my dear, not at all.
It is excellent. Very good title. Indeed,
It's nice to have a guy who's smarter than you are. I've learned that repeatedly over the last 10 years, let me say. But I'm so happy to have you here because
Thank you.
I think of you as kind of the world's expert on ITC. You think your head is so level-headed. You think about these things in a way that isn't based in you. It's based in truth. And that's what I love about the work that you do. I mean, you were a really big shot in the world of diplomacy. And you realized that wasn't important. What was important was talking about people not in bodies and talking with them and developing the truth for the world long term and broadly. And, bless you, my dear, for seeing clearly how important this work is.
Thank you, Roberta. You know, because I was never a person of the paranormal, let's call it this way, when these extraordinary messages, the direct radio voices, happened to me, it was a very extraordinary happening in my life, something I never expected, and I didn't even believe could be true, exactly because I had no contact with the so-called paranormal. And as my predecessor, the great pioneer of this discipline, Friedrich Jürgensen, that I was telling you before we were directly online, he said this is the most important thing in the history of mankind.
Yes.
This possibility of being able to communicate directly through some electronic media with what everything makes us believe are beings in another dimension. So what else is more important than this? He asked Friedrich Jürgensen.
Tell us about him. Tell us about him. Most people have never heard of him. Tell us.
But he's perhaps the most important of everybody, really. Indeed, you know, in 1959, he was a very famous opera singer and painter. He was a man who, being an atheist, he was a private visit to the Pope, two popes, Pope Pius XII, and then Pope Paul VI. So, and he was an atheist. He never believed in God and these things of religion. But his intelligence, his sensitivity were so big, so great, that the popes were fascinated, and they used to invite him to talk with them. He painted several portraits of these two popes of his time. And then one day, when he was exactly recording he was also a movie director, recording a bird singing, night birds singing for a documentary on the life of birds, that he was also a movie director, as I just said, that he wanted to make some extraneous voices appeared into this recording. This was 12th of June, 1959. And among these strange voices that addressed him, there was a voice that he recognized as his mother's, long deceased. And from that day on, until the end of his life, which happened in 1987, he never stopped. I was reading, because I have this work that I was telling you of my Swedish friend, a journalist who was very close to Friedrich Jürgensen, but who suddenly died just a few months ago. And I was stuck with this book in my hands, which I will try to the best of my strength to publish, because it has incredible details of this fascinating life of Friedrich Jürgensen. So I was reading, because I'm dealing with the book, I'm translating it from the Swedish. I have finished now, but I have to put it together and structure it and all that. Yet, that one of the international press conferences, this is to give you an idea of the dimension of his work. In 1963, if I'm not 63, 64, he had two in his house, a house in the country that I have visited in Sweden. he convoked, he called upon an international press conference, and there were people there from all these important media of the world, like CNN, like, if you remember, there was a magazine when I was a youngster called Life, wasn't it, Roberta, America?
Yes, absolutely. Life, yes, exactly.
Yeah. Life, the BBC, all this from all over the world came to Nisund, which is the name of the place, where he received his first voices recordings, to listen to him. And his message was that I have recorded the voices of the dead. And of course, nobody believed this. We are in 1959. That's when it happened for the first time, with the exception of some sporadic recordings of that American man who was a medium, Attila von Slee, but who never publicized them, and they were just little words in the middle of his sessions, of his mediumistic sessions, also with Raymond Bayless. But Jurgensen, no, it was big. Friedrich Jurgensen, and he was able, exactly because of his intellectual capacity, artistic value, to spread it all over the world. So this media, international media, top media of the time, came to that little village. He had, I was there, a beautiful estate there. And they opened their mouths and said, speak with the dead through a recorder. Oh, that's not possible. But yes, it was possible.
It's not possible, except that it's true. That's the only thing.
That cannot be. But then he made experiments with them also during both international press conferences, and there were results. And then of course, the story continues.
Yes.
And the popes, and one of the popes, I think it was Pope Paul VI, who told him, whom I met. Well, I met from the distance, but when I was very young, I was a travel guide. Met him in Castel Gandolfo, which is the summer residence of the popes. And the Pope told him, yes, we already know about this possibility, because there was how do you call them? A monk, not a monk, yes, a monk, but also a scientist, Father Gemelli, a very famous medical scientist. As you perhaps remember, the last Pope before this one was John Paul II, wasn't he? He was last days of his life in this Gemelli clinic, and this Agostino Gemelli clinic in Rome is because of this scientist's name, the one who the Pope told Jurgensen, we already know, because one of ours inadvertently recorded voices from another dimension. And it was true, because of course it was true. Otherwise the Pope would not tell him. But Father Agostino Gemelli, when he was working with in the laboratory of physics of the University of Milan, he, by chance also, he was working with Father Pellegrino Ernetti, cleaning of the harmonics, Gregorian chants. And in this process, a voice came into this Gregorian chants, and they were stunned, both of them, Gemelli and Ernetti, because it was Gemelli's deceased father's voice. And they said, but this is the voice of my father. So they thought something. We are getting here some hallucinogenic stuff here or whatever.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, this is an incredible story. And they again started the work with the Gregorian chants. And Father Gemelli, this Dr. Gemelli, said, I heard a voice. It sounded like my father's voice. And again, in the next recording, a male voice replied, of course it's I. Don't you recognize me? And then of course they were very, very preoccupied, worried even, because they said, what will the church think of this thing? Because of course the bad reputation of Spiritism, as it is in Europe, or called in Europe, spiritualism, and all these things that the church, the Catholic Church, refused, not any longer, I would say, no, not any longer, but they said, we better tell the Pope. So they requested an audience with the Pope at the time before. This was September 1952. The Pope was Pope Pius XII, who received them, and they told the Pope the story. And this is a famous situation. The Pope said, don't be afraid, dear priests, because a tape recorder is an objective machine. It cannot be influenced by anything. It works depending on the acoustic waves that are present. So this is nothing wrong with this. It even confirms our teachings that life does not finish with death. Oh. And so, of course, Father Agostino Gemelli, famous scientist, the University of Rome, there is a chair with his name, and Father Pellegrino Ernetti. And it remained here like this. They did not continue. We don't know if they continued or not, but they were high-ranking priests, so they never publicized these, and, because they were Catholic priests. But the Pope told them, don't be afraid. It even confirms our teachings that death is not the end of life. It continues post-mortem. And then the next Pope, who was also acquainted with Friedrich Jürgensen, told him for the first time, well, we already know of this possibility, and told him the story. Because this happened with two of ours, Father Gemelli and Ernetti. We know that this can be true. This is true. And so from then on, Jürgensen was a very frequent visitor, guest to the Pope. He was decorated with a very high-ordered decoration of the Vatican. He was invited to make 2 or 3 movies, one about Saint Peter, I think. He excavated the ruins of Pompeii with the permission of the Pope, and so on. And he was an atheist. And the Pope knew he was an atheist because he told him. So this is a very, for me, extremely interesting story.
And he's well known in our circles, but he's really not well known to the public at all. We have to change that. So I'm glad you're working on this book. When will it come out?
Yes, because it contains details that now that its main author, I say main because I am the second, because I have redone the book, not the ideas, of course not, I will never do that, but the form, obviously, it could not be published as it was, because it was total nonsense from the English language point of view. And I told Anders Leopold, I said, Anders, this can never be published as is, because nobody will publish it. It doesn't make sense from the point of view of the language. And he said, will you translate it? And I said, well, I'll try, but from the Swedish. But I know all these details of Friedrich Jürgensen pretty well. There are others that I found out in the book. But then suddenly Anders Leopold died. He died just 6 or so months ago. And I was left with the book. And now I have nobody to ask, Anders, what do you mean by this? As I used to do. Now, no more. It would be nice.
Let's see if we can't get you more help too with the book, because it's very important. Let's see what we can do to get you even more help with understanding.
Well, thank you. It's very important, because there are things there. I know, I would say, well, all the ITC literature, that nobody, now that Anders Leopold is not with us, Friedrich Jürgensen is gone also.
Yeah.
Nobody except me knows, because I have the book, I have the manuscript. So.
Well, there are other people who can help you too. So we'll work on that. But meanwhile, let's talk about your book. Your book is called Glimpses of Another World, and you say that it's a collection of thoughts, impressions, reflections, and experiences of a person who has spent the past 20 years of her life pondering the issues of life and death and reflecting upon the information received by Instrumental Transcommunication, or ITC, from her communicators who affirm to be the dead speaking from another dimension beyond time, which is a good summary of what you're doing. Now, this group who speak in Portuguese are not in bodies. We think of them as Rio de Tempo. Now, to me, speaking, who's just completely rank amateur in this, I've never even attempted to do ITC, but it's odd to me that the most sophisticated and advanced communicators not in bodies speak Portuguese. They're in Brazil, they're speaking to Brazilian communicators, or they're in Portugal speaking with Portuguese communicators like yourself. Do you know why that is?
Well, you see, I can speak from my own point of view, of course, because that's what I know best. Rio do Tempo means time, the river of time,
right.
Time stream, as it was translated.
Time stream, that's how we think of it, yes.
Yeah, time stream was Zeitstrom, because that's how they identified themselves years ago at Maggie and Jules Hartsch-Fischbach in Luxembourg.
Yes.
They were the first recipients of this group. And one day, this was years before I started, years before I started experimenting in ITC. One day there was a conference in Brazil, I think must have been, because that's how the thing happened, in São Paulo. And the Hartsch-Fischbach had regular contacts, as you know, with this Zeitstrom, the name in German, as they identified themselves. Then it was translated into English, not by the communicators, by the people who studied the subject. And there was this conference in São Paulo. And suddenly it was Dr. Constantin Draudive, who used to communicate with the Hartsch-Fischbach, high entity, whom they called the technician, because he was the one, who directed the setting up of the machines in their house and all that. So, but a high entity, as he described himself, or itself, I think better said. Anyway, suddenly the technician said, we have here somebody with a message. This is how Rio do Tempo started, with a message for the conference you are going to have in São Paulo. And I have this recording in my computer. Professor Ernst Senkowski gave it to me. And then, so this male voice started speaking, identifying himself in Portuguese. Of course, the conference was in São Paulo. And said, as I said, I have this first talk by Carlos de Almeida, and said, I am Carlos de Almeida from the Portuguese group at station, Rio do Tempo, and I have a message for you at so. I don't recall the message by heart. But so he spoke in Portuguese, and he said, I am Carlos de Almeida from the Portuguese group. We call our group Rio do Tempo. And that's how it happened.
Okay, but still it's persisted now. That was decades ago, wasn't it, that all happened?
This first communication by Carlos de Almeida, when he said our group at the station is called Rio do Tempo, he spoke in Portuguese, as I said, is of 19, when the conference took place in São Paulo. I think 1990, between 92 and 1994, something like this.
Right.
Before I started. Yeah.
Yeah. You and I were mere infants, my dear. We were. It was early in this work when that happened, but it's persisted. And I'm not sure why, but I accept that the real people doing this work, as we know, are not in bodies. Those are the people doing this work. People like you, wonderful as you are their assistants, basically, are the people who are... Absolutely
true, what you are saying, exactly. I have said that too before. True, completely true. But before, if I may, going back to the language issue that you mentioned, when Professor David Fontana lived, you remember David Fontana, yeah, Roberta?
Yeah, heard the name, yes.
Yeah, the psychologist, psychologist and parapsychologist. David, who died in 2000, some 10 years ago, David came frequently to my house to listen to Rio do Tempo, to the communications and all that, and to get acquainted with what was going on. And also to my house in France, in Lyon, when I lived in Lyon. So one day, without telling me absolutely anything, nothing at all, he didn't tell me anything, David. We were in my little studio in my house, in this house here, and David, I used to call him and say, David, come, Rio do Tempo is speaking. So he would come, very, very rushing. He got into the room and stood there for a little while, and suddenly he said, Rio do Tempo, we are delighted that you are speaking. They were speaking in Portuguese. David didn't know Portuguese well. He knew a little bit because he had been professor in one of the universities here in Portugal and in the Algarve and here in the north of Portugal. So David said, but can you say, how are you to me? And he stopped. And I said, what is he doing, David? You don't know about this voice? It is published. It's also in my website. I said, what is David doing? Asking them to repeat, how are you? And indeed, that's what he did. And I said, oh my goodness, because I didn't know. I knew David, of course, but not so extremely well to be absolutely confident. I thought, what if they cannot repeat what he's asking them to repeat. I said, what will David think? That this is a fabrication or what? And I was so, because I didn't expect him to do this at all. Of course, he didn't tell me anything. And so the voices stopped for a little while, a few seconds. And then they again came back and they said in Portuguese, we speak Portuguese. They said in Portuguese, nós falamos português. And another little pause, and they said loud and strongly, how are you? You know, and I said, oh my goodness, I can't believe this. I said, oh my goodness, I said, thank goodness that they repeated the sentence David asked them to repeat. So he was very happy, of course, David, and so on, and we continued speaking, and then David said, you speak in English. They were speaking, but they were repeating what he had just uttered in my studio. That is the important thing, of course. And another voice, a different one, said, this David, we can't put up with him. The voice said, it's true. David is unbearable, the voice said. And so it was.
Well, so they don't use languages there, really. I mean, they use they speak by thought, and it's
exactly
it's kind of a universal language anyway.
Exactly, absolutely true. That's what they inform us about. Yes, yeah.
So it's almost a useless thing for them, this whole notion of languages.
It must be in their dimension. But here,
whatever we speak, they probably just hear it translated for them anyway.
Once I asked them years ago, I asked my main communicator, who happened to be the one who spoke in Luxembourg, Carlos de Almeida. I asked him, Carlos de Almeida, how do you hear we say here? In this case, it was what I say here. And he replied, a very loud, very good, totally clear voice. He replied, it's rhythm. It's rhythm. We know when we follow it. Exactly as I am telling you. So, which rhythm? That is the question, because the voices are like this, you know, they come and go, they stop and they finish suddenly and so on. Jorgensen already speaks about this. Anyway, I said, rhythm, which rhythm? And then I thought it must be the brain rhythm, isn't it? Must be. Which other rhythm? Certainly not the voice. This is all very complex, I think.
It's extraordinarily complex, and more people need to know what you know. We're coming too close to the end of our time to really even get into this. I think this is such a fascinating field. We have to talk a whole lot more about it. I would like to put you in touch with Craig Hogan. You know who he is, because he is going to be so fascinated with what you're working on, and he would be so happy to help you, I'm sure, to puzzle out some of the things that you're trying to work on. I mean, this is just the kind of thing he loves to work on too. And he works so quickly, and he is so smart. So I'm going to put you in touch with him, and he'll see if he can't help you.
Fine, thank you. Maybe I met him in Bristol. I'm not sure. Bristol in the UK. I'm not sure, Roberta. I have
He's
an
been all over the
idea.
place. You probably have. But anyway, if he can't help you, he'll find you someone who can help you, really help you. But what you're doing is so important. You know that. I mean, I'm just telling you what you already know. But I think people listening need to understand this is powerful, groundbreaking work that you're doing. And I'm so happy to know you and have you as a friend and watch you do these wonderful, powerful, earth-moving, ground-shaking things, my dear. This is so wonderful what you're doing.
Thanks to you for the opportunity. I really enjoy not only speaking with you, also very much because you are so interested, and it's so rewarding to speak with somebody who is open to receiving information. That's the most important thing in anybody's life, in my opinion.
Thank you, my dear. This has been fantastic. We have to have you right back again because we haven't even started to talk about your wonderful book.
Yes. Thank you, Roberta.
You always are such a wonderful, wonderful guest.
Thank you. And you are such a wonderful host because you are so understandable and receptive and interested and all these things. So it's a joy to speak with somebody like you, of course. That is
We have fun. And, if it's not fun, why do it? And this is so much fun.
Thank you. So, we'll be in touch when you want. And
very soon. Anabela Cardoso is somebody that we really have to pay a lot of attention to because the work she is doing is so extraordinary. So again, we have come to the end of our time. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so glad you were with us today. Please never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began and you never will end. And when you really get what that means, it's going to change everything in your life for the better. Next week, our guest will be Kevin Krenitsky. He'll be talking with us about something that's very much lacking in far too many people's lives these days, and that's spiritual peace. His book is called The Still Point, The Simplicity of Spiritual Enlightenment. He is another medical doctor who found the stress of his profession unbearable. In fact, he had lived with a deep background of anxiety, fear, and stress that had waxed and waned since his childhood. At the age of only 40, in the midst of decades of suppressing tremendous inner and outer conflict, he decided there had to be another way, and there was. This willingness to change then led him to a decade of studying non-duality by way of A Course in Miracles, which is the great core lessons. Basically, it's the gospel lessons of Jesus, channeled by Jesus, by a group led by Jesus in the 1960s. In 2015, at the height of a successful career, Kevin turned away into relative isolation and found that what is really a more direct path to recognizing one's true nature. He wrote The Still Point to help others find their own eternal nature, which he says is happiness itself. And this week we've been talking with the wonderful, beautiful Anabela Cardoso, who is an expert at Instrumental Transcommunication, or ITC, and she was with us for the third time, but not the last. We've been talking about her wonderful recent book called Glimpses of Eternity, but we've really been talking about so much more. In fact, communication by electronic means with the dead is almost impossible, but I think the breakthroughs are going to start to come now. The fact that it hasn't already been universally developed after decades of devoted efforts by experts who are not in bodies and their devoted helpers on earth lets you see how very hard it is. But I promise you now, my dear friends, that it is going to happen. And devoted folks like Anabela Cardoso and Sonia Rinaldi are the greatest servants of the greater reality's leading experts, who are the experimenters in spirit who are working right now to make it happen. This is really a very exciting time for all of us to be alive. And by the way, as we look forward to Seek Reality Online, let's not forget that the Afterlife Research and Education Institute is Seek Reality Online's nonprofit cousin. AREI is headed by our beautiful friend, Dr. R. Craig Hogan. Craig is the sole living person who is most on top of everything, afterlife and greater reality. AREI puts out a wonderful monthly newsletter. Just go to afterlifeinstitute.org and sign up to learn from the man who remains my primary teacher. As you know, my own nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Growing Forever, The Fun of Living Together, and very soon now, The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity that Jesus taught. For young children, there is The Fun of Meeting Jesus, and you can order all these books through bookstores on Amazon.com, and the adult books are also available as audiobooks. If you want to talk about any of my books, or if you want to talk about anything at all, you can always contact me through the green contact block on RobertaGrimes.com. I do answer every email. Just please be sure to give me your correct email address. Past episodes of Seek Reality are available on webtalkradio.net, realrevolutionradio.com, iTunes, iHeartRadio, and a number of other stations, including the Dream Vision 7 radio family, and really pretty much wherever podcasts can be found. Many people now tell me they just listen each week through the Seek Reality app that you can find for free in the iTunes App Store and pretty much wherever podcast apps can be found. And meanwhile, my beloved friends, this had been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy, please make the most of this coming week in our one reality, always knowing that you are a powerful, powerful eternal being. And you, most of all, and in particular in the entire universe, you are infinitely loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.